Sorry for the delay there. Our Wi-Fi is a bit spotty, as you can tell. But we've got that sorted out. Anyway, I'm Ryan Vanderwerf here. I'm here to talk about Amazon Alexa and Groovy. So we've got some cool stuff relating to using Grails and Groovy to do skills for the Echo. These things are starting to be deployed in Europe. You can buy them in Germany and UK right now. I would guess that Spain would be the next market because it's one of the most popular languages in the world. So kind of shocked they didn't do that one first. But they still work here. If you go to UK or whatever, you can buy one and run it here, and it works fine. It just only understands English or German at this point. A little bit about myself. I'm a software engineer in the OCI Grails team. I've got father of 2 kiddos. I've got one of them here. It's my helper today. I'm also help run a Austin, Texas user group for Groovy and Grails. That's where I'm from. I like to modify all kinds of things, cars, gadgets like these, phones, laptops, and I also do a lot of DevOps stuff and Grails coding for OCI. What we're going to cover today here, we're going to talk about what is Alexa. How many people here have ever heard of what an Alexa is or an Echo Dot? So it's pretty popular for something you technically can't buy here, right? Just yet. But there's other ways you can use it. I'll talk about how Alexa works, talk about kind of the evolution of UI, why this thing is popular, and what kind of problems it solves. I'll talk about the software concepts and components. I'll show you how a Lambda skill works using Lambdas and Groovy. And then I'll show you a podcast skill. We have the Groovy podcast is a skill that I wrote and published for listening to the podcast. So it's automatically updated whenever they post a new one. And we'll do things like account linking. We'll use a Grails app. I've got a demo for a tool called VictorOps. Has anyone here heard of VictorOps? That's a monitoring tool for DevOps teams to keep track of whether systems are up or down and track incidents and find out who's on call and schedule them, things like that. So what is Alexa? Basically just a voice interface. It's basically just a cloud-based voice recognition service. So these devices don't really do a whole lot. It's all in their cloud is where the magic happens. Basically, you just say something to it, an audio response goes to their server. It translates that into text and then fires off JSON back to you saying how you want to interact with it. And so this entire handshaking back and forth is just JSON going back and forth. There's different kinds of SDKs. We're talking about the Skills SDK here. They also have a voice SDK, so if you make your own hardware device, you can make it add speech recognition with Alexa to it. So they've made things like watches and all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's completely open, and you can build whatever you want. They also have a home automation API. I won't talk about that either. This is the devices. This is a regular Echo, the big one, and then there's the Tap, which is this little guy here. It's a battery-powered guy. You tap it to talk. With the recent update, though, you can actually leave it in always-on mode and say, Alexa, do this, and it'll respond to you. Right now, I have that turned off because I've got this one going. And this is the Dot right here. This is a small one. It's got a teeny little speaker in it. They're cost under $50 US. It doesn't play music very well, but it does great for talking and voice and things like that. And it's a very inexpensive way to get into it. So other things the Alexa can do is, you can ask it what the weather will be. You can have it order a pizza. You can ask it facts. It'll look up things on Wikipedia for you. The internet search engine stuff isn't so great because it doesn't use Google. But the Google Home is another device that does use Google. It's easier to search for things. But I have to say this kind of device isn't a great thing for saying a lot of data back to you. It's better for telling it to do things. This is what an Echo looks like when you take it apart. There's little circuit board in it. Actually, the software is open source. You can actually download it off their site. They package it up. So if you think it's spying on the CIA from the CIA for you, you can take a look at the code and determine that for yourself. More than likely not. It would be mostly pretty boring stuff. The nice tall Echo's got a really nice speaker in it and has really good bass response. I didn't bring that one. That one's at home. That's the first one to it. And the reason these things work so well is they've got a multi-dimensional microarray. It's got several microphones in it that point all directions, so you don't have to really yell at it. This is the Dot. It's this guy. That was actually a first generation Dot here. This is the new one. They're a lot cheaper. I think they were about $80 US initially. This is what a Tap looks like. It's basically got a battery in it. You can carry it around like a Bluetooth speaker, but it's got Alexa on it too. All right. One thing that you probably can buy here, you can do Alexa on, is a Fire TV. So you can buy those little Fire TV sticks, and they're pretty inexpensive. All of those have Alexa built into them now. So you can, all these same skills you write are accessible on all of these devices because they're hooked to your Amazon developer account. You can access them on any of your things that are attached to your account, including a Fire TV stick or any of these devices. They all work pretty much the same. There's other things. Here's the Google Home. I have one of these too. I'll be giving a talk of this one in GreatConf EU. It isn't quite as rich as far as developer abilities, but the speech recognition is really great. Move. All right. This is actually a product called Ling Long Ding Dong. I found out. It's a real thing. It does Chinese. It's like a Chinese version of Alexa. And you can make your own on a Raspberry Pi. There's a little link in the links here. You can build your own. What is wrong with this microphone? All right, back to the Alexa skills here. I don't know what's wrong with this microphone. Test, test, test. Yeah, if I move at all, it like starts. Yeah. All right. So this is the architecture of the Alexa skill. And basically what's happening here is your stuff goes to the Alexa service. It parses it out, and then it comes back to the device and says something. And it's always a JSON thing. So you can pass back either text that it'll interpret, and that can either play sounds or talk to you or continue an interaction. So let me talk about how all that works. One cardinal rule of these things is that you can never wake one up without being talked to first. Because they're worried about freaking people out where it just wakes up in the middle of the day and screams at you. They don't let you do that. There's only one caveat that lets you get around that. It is a built-in alarm clock function. That's the only thing that can just suddenly wake up like a long polling process. There's no other way to make it just, say things like an intercom. Supposedly they're coming out of the device that can do that, but we'll see. All right. So what are we trying to solve here with these things? Why are they kind of popular? And it's kind of a UI evolution. And this works for actually a lot of non-technical people, this kind of device. We've start with character-based interfaces. We've gone to web interfaces, mobile, and now we're going to voice user interfaces. And this opens up kind of a whole new way of interacting with devices when your hands are busy. And maybe you're at your desk even, and you want to say, what's the status of my servers? Who's on call? What's going on? It has a lot of applications, a lot of things. Or you're cooking in a kitchen and your hands are dirty and you want to find out what the next ingredient is for your recipe. That's the kind of stuff that this thing's really great at. And it's really great kind of in the house setting where you can just say, hey, Alexa, turn on my lights, turn on the kitchen light, turn off the kitchen light. I have a lot of that stuff set up at home with home automation. And that's really kind of what this solves. So we've came from green screens, having readability issues, to graphical user interfaces. We fit more data on the screen and all of that. And we go up to the web interfaces. Now we're into mobile. Everyone's doing mobile stuff. And now we're up to voice user interfaces today. And that's having a complex conversation with basically a robot to do things and make your life easier. So let's talk about the SDKs here. We're talking about the Skills SDK. They also have something you can do called a Flash Briefing SDK. It's not really Groovy related because all it is an RSS feed you can set up for it. And then you can say, when you wake up in the morning, Alexa, give me my Flash Briefing, and it'll tell you the news, and it'll pick your preferred news source and kind of tell you what's going on and the weather for the day and any kind of appointments you have in your calendar, kind of reminding you what to do so you don't forget. It won't just wake up, though, like an alarm from your calendar and say, hey, it's time to go to this meeting. It doesn't do that right now. So again, it's don't call us, we'll call you. Everything you do, you post to an Alexa service, and then it calls you back. So everything you do has to be on a publicly facing URL that Alexa can talk back to. And so basically, when you talk to Alexa, you have to wait for it to respond to you before you can interact with it. And so we have some stuff in the code and the SDKs here that kind of protects you. It's got some encryption checking, application ID checking. You have to have all these things. It's got a timestamp check to make sure that some nefarious person on the internet isn't trying to talk to your skill that's running in the cloud. A lot of this is driven by a fork of the SDK I made, so I got tired of them waiting on 50 pull requests that hadn't been touched in 8 months. So I just went ahead and fixed their Java SDK, added all the audio features to it, fixed a lot of the bugs, and I have that posted on my GitHub page. You can download it. I'll have all the links here at the end on the slides, and that way you can use that to make skills. We've got a Grails plugin, and we got LazyBone templates that all use that same SDK. All right, so what does the Speechlet SDK do? It really is just JSON going back and forth, but it does a lot of stuff for you to kind of get running quickly. It'll do things like validate the request. It'll give you a nice set of objects you can respond to, like events. And it also helps you build card responses. So the way that works is you can, on your web interface here, or the mobile app, it has a thing called a card. And these are cards here. So this tells me, this is all the running history of what I've done. So I said, tell me a joke, did that a few times. What's the answer to life, the universe, and everything? Give me the answer. So in your SDK, you can respond with text that's slightly different for this versus what you say. Because, for example, if you have a URL being returned for something, you don't want it to say HTTP, blah, blah, right? That's really annoying. So, but you could print it here, and it would be a link you could do things with. All right, so when we make a skill here, it's got a few components to it. One of those is an intent schema, which is laying out what kind of functions your skill can do. And then we have something called slots that are kind of custom parameters you can set up that are sort of gated. And then we can set up a thing called sample utterances, and I'll show you that. And basically what that means is sample utterances are the phrases you say that can activate a certain function in your skill. And so what will happen is Alexa's service, when you submit it, will calculate all the derivations it can based on what you've given it, and then it'll try to figure out what you're saying from that to launch your skill and launch the right intent, which is what you're trying to do. So let me pull up a quick sample one here. All right, can we see that? So this is an intent schema. And basically, it's just a JSON document that says, these are my intents. These are the names of the intents. And any kind of parameter slot, what is called a slot, is a parameter it can take. So a lot of these don't take them. Some of them do things by a username, in this case. But these are all the things like next incident, when am I on call. These are all the things this skill can do there. And then when we get to sample utterances, this is what this is. So this is basically a list. It says the first parameter is your intent name, and then this is your speech of what it's going to say. So the more derivations you have of it, the better it gets. So sometimes you'll even intentionally want to misspell things in there because someone may say things differently or have a thicker accent, or just vary the words, like who's on call, what's on call. See, I've got all those variations there. That's just to make it more responsive from the UI perspective. Otherwise, it will just have a really narrow focus, and then you'll have to say the exact right thing, right? And people don't want to have to say the exact right thing. You want it to understand what you would say in your conversation. So you want to make this as rich as you can, and as long as you can. And it's actually okay to have hundreds of lines that are very similar or misspelled for the same intent. And that will just make, the more you give it, the better it gets.
Can you use like synonyms or prefix, for example, complex sentences?
Yes, I'll show you that in a second, actually. So it uses something called, for advanced speech, it will do something called SSML markup. And so when you give it a response, in that case that I showed you, those cards, those were simple, plain text. You can also give SSML, which will give it hints on how to say things in certain ways. And they actually have a concept called speechicons, which are kind of pre-made snippets of things for common phrases people say that sound very natural, like good morning, goodbye, things like that. So it will flow naturally, and you can add those into your responses. That way, it sounds even more natural. So you can kind of give it a little bit of personality that way. All right, slots. These are those parameters, basically. All it is, you can gate them. For example, here I've got a, this is the developer console. This is where you create all of the stuff. Here we can take a look at the Groovy Podcast Player. All right, this guy doesn't have any custom slot types. I believe the VictorOps one does. So you can tell if they're live or in development. So once something's live, you can't change it. You have to go through the approval process again if you want to change it, because they vet everything, and they actually have a whole QA department that checks your skill before they're allowed to be published. And they check for copyright violations. They test your application pretty thoroughly. They found all kinds of crazy bugs in my skills that most QA people I know wouldn't find. And things like, oh, tell me your name. And one guy said, I told it a number. If I say number 8 is your name, it crashes. And then they reject it and send it back to you. And you have to keep going through this approval process. It can take a while, depending on how buggy your thing is, and if you're following their kind of guidelines of how things should work. This guy has slots. They call that the interaction model, right? So here I've got usernames, and I've got a custom slot of like things to help it understand. These are usernames, right? So those aren't words. So it needs help on how to interpret that. And that doesn't even have to be an exhaustive list. It's just kind of giving it a hint for those things. If I give a different username, it will try its best to understand it, or not if it doesn't. It'll, for example, doing things with names. Baruch from JFrog, we had that, and it said, "Tell me your name," and he said Baruch, and then it says, "I heard Bottles," so like your name's Bottles now, okay, so that's now Baruch's name. It's Bottles. He's like, okay, sounds good. So yeah, that's slots. Sample utterances, we showed you that. So this is training it to what to understand. You can put your parameters in kind of, mustache braces and curly braces to add parameters into it. So when you need to say a phrase that's a parameterized thing, it can understand that and pass that to you. All right, and this is we showed you the Alexa app, which is this guy. This is where you find skills. You can search for ones that are published. These are all the popular ones. There's over 10,000 of these things published now. They've hit kind of a hockey stick effect since last Christmas, where everyone bought these things they were on sale for $40 US. And it's just exploded on the amount of people making stuff for this. You can do anything. You can do Uber, you order a pizza, It's the things for elderly people if they like fall down and can't get up. You know that old TV commercial, "I've fallen and I can't get up." You can actually have the Alexa call for help for them, which is So there's a lot of applications for this stuff that's not techie things, but for normal everyday people that have disabilities and they can't get up to change the lights or things like that. So there's a lot of workout things and cooking things. If you make your own skills, you have to click on your skills and it separates them out. These are all stuff you have installed, or if you've got stuff in development, it'll appear here. So I've got this one here that I've been working on. And this is how you link an account as well. So right now I have it linked, but if I disable this, I can link it. And I'll show you that after we take a look at the Groovy Podcast skill. All right, cards. These are these things here that we showed you. These are cards. So every time you call an intent for a speechlet, it'll give you a card text back that tells you what it did. This is kind of a rolling history of everything I've done for a while. You can clear out the history too if you think it's embarrassing or whatever. But one thing you can do it's a fun prank to play. If you were playing music on it, you can go back here and actually resume playback. So you may have stopped it like 6 hours ago, and then say your kids or wife are at home, you can go back in here and start playing again, and then your Echo will just start playing, and they'll be wondering who did that. That's the second most evil thing, is to playing with the lights while you're not at home either. Your wife thinks her house is haunted or something. The lights keep going on and off. I don't know what's going on. All right. Cards are kind of limited though. You can only do really simple text, and you cannot do any kind of HTML markup. I think there's a way to get like an icon you can show, and that's it. I think they're really worried about people, because anyone can publish these skills. You could do something nefarious with some JavaScript injection, so they just don't allow it at all. So that's unfortunately limits what you can do on cards quite a bit. All right, you can open an app here. So I could say, computer, ask Groovy Podcast to play the latest episode. Thinking. Or not. But you can tell it shortcuts to do other things. You can say, computer, open VictorOps. Come on, Wi-Fi. You can do it, Wi-Fi. Nope.
Sorry, your Echo Dot lost its connection.
Open Groovy Podcast. Let's see if this one will work.
Welcome to the Groovy Podcast skill.
Okay.
To start playing a podcast, say play episode number or say play latest episode.
Play latest episode. So I can access the skill by saying open, or I can say ask it to do something and jump ahead to an intent. So I could say ask Groovy.
Sorry, I'm having trouble accessing your skill right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Wi-Fi. So you can basically skip ahead, and so I can say ask Groovy Podcast to play the latest episode, right? So I can do that without having to say open and then wait and then tell it to do something. All speechlet skills allow you to kind of have jump ahead text like that, and that's all kind of built in. You don't need to do anything special in your skill to do that. It's just basically you can say ask or tell, and then give a skill name and then an intent, and it'll go ahead and jump in and launch that. All right. So there's a new thing called audio player directive. So now the Groovy Podcast skill, for example, will play the Groovy Podcast. And what it's doing is actually going down to Podbean, finding the latest episode, scanning through the RSS feed, and then finds the latest one and then plays it. And then through this audio player directive, you can play, stop, and pause playback of things. And I'll show you the code here in a second for that. But basically, It's using a DynamoDB table to, every time you do it, it remembers your unique ID and what you were playing and where it was at. And then you pause it, and you can go back, and it'll remember. And that's how it does that. And here's the SSML that I was telling you about. So if you want to do advanced stuff, you can play sound clips via SSML, or you can do advanced syntax to help it say things even in other languages. So if you do want to do little short sound snippets while your skill's going, you have to record them. This is a good cheat command here that I found to make it exactly right. The thing's super picky, and it has to be streamed from SSL as well. I have it hosted on an S3 bucket that's got SSL on it for this one. You can also do markup here. So basically, there's no like helper stuff for this. You basically have to do the markup in building it up in strings. I don't have anything to build SSML yet for you, but this is what it looks like. So instead of redoing just plain text, you could put this markup around it and do that. And then here's a thing to say, speak numbers differently. You can do say as. There's a whole index of stuff here. And so here's the link you can look at. It's got every variation of SSML. There's a ton of stuff in there for all kinds of, making things sound more natural versus a computer reading things to you. If you want to test this stuff, you don't necessarily even need a device. You can go to echosim.io. And then you can just log in with an Amazon account here, and then it uses your computer's microphone, and you can test and run skills that way. I don't think it works right with the audio player stuff. That stuff's fairly new, but it works with pretty much everything else. So when we do the workshops for this, we have like an all-day or half-day workshop where you can make these skills and spit them out. We just use this thing, and we create some Amazon accounts for you, and that's how everyone tests their stuff that they work on. It's actually an officially endorsed thing, so it's safe to give it your password for Amazon. Yeah, it's limited. It only does English and German right now. I suspect Spanish would be the next language they're supported. They have open sourced the underlying guts of Alexa. There are 2 services that already do like 48 languages. So they're just trying to push that forward to the speech recognition part and make that sound smooth before they launch that. All right, let's take a look at the Groovy Podcast app here. Here's basically the layout of it. So I have a Lazybones template. It'll create this project for you, and you just run it, and it will spit out a basic Gradle build file, and it'll create a speechless class for you. And basically, this is what it is here. This is the Groovy Podcast Speechlet. It'll ask you, what do you want to call your class name and all that, and it basically sets all this stuff up for you. I don't know why my syntax stuff's not working here, but what it does is it creates all these events here for you that you can react to. So we've got, on playback started, on playback failed, session started. And what happens when you first go into this, when you launch the skill, it does on session started. And here I'm just testing stuff. I set an attribute, and then I initialize my DynamoDB stuff to get ready. And then I say on launch. And this is where the main point when you launch an intent. It's going to call on launch and say like hello on launch. So we have a get welcome response, and it just spits out the string. It says, welcome to the Groovy Podcast skill. And then we return text or in a card. Right? This thing's using the same thing for both, which is often fine unless you're doing things like links or things like that. And the next thing is called on intent that gets called. So this will get fired up when you say do something like play latest episode. So what's going to happen here is it's going to look through here, and it's going to find the intent name and then just basically launch a method that fires it up. So I've got play latest episode intent. So I say when I play latest episode, we're going to go in here and play it. And we've also got a pause and resume. And that's using DynamoDB table to keep track of it. So in this case, we're playing the latest episode. I'm going to a Podbean URL, slurping that up, parsing through it, and trying to find the latest episode and try to find an episode number, which is kind of difficult depending on how people lay out their podcasts. Some people don't really put things in a linear fashion with numbers, but Groovy Podcast is really good about putting a number in the title that we scan through and look for that. And then what we do is this is the stuff that we added to the SDK here. It's doing audio streams. So you've got an audio stream object, you've got an audio item object, so you can just package that up, and then you end up giving it a directive to play something. And that's what we got, our audio directive play. We're firing up DynamoDB to know you're playing something, and then put a key in the table. So it tells you what podcast number you're playing, what URL you were playing, the offset, which is where you're playing at that moment, if you pause or resume. And then a date I put in there so I can just clear out old records as a janitor function. And then we just say tell it response, and we can give it a audio directive list here. And that actually initiates it to tell it to start playing back. You can do other things while it's going. So it'll say when the playback actually starts, you can handle responses in there. I don't really do anything with these, but you can. You can, when something happens, when they stop, when it's almost finished. If it couldn't play, you can make it say a certain message back or give them an error. So you can do a lot of really cool stuff around all of the audio streaming. And then it has a concept of sessions, which is interesting. So you'll see here on intent, it creates a session. This is very similar to a servlet session. You can basically put attributes in here and then pull them back out when another intent is called. So it's kind of good if you're doing a multi-step process and you want to know how far deep they are. You can add a session value and pull that out later and evaluate it. Sessions do not work with audio playback, which is really an unfortunate thing with Amazon. I think they want playback state to persist like forever, and the sessions have a limited lifespan. And so if you want to track state while you're doing any kind of audio playback, you have to put it in an external table or DynamoDB or some sort of place to put state in that's not theirs, because they won't help you with it. It makes things a little bit more difficult to develop on the audio front. All right, let's take a look at some more advanced stuff. So what if I want to do something advanced, like I've got a VictorOps skill here, right? And I don't want to have hard-coded credentials, right? I want it to use my Alexa user ID's credentials. I want to be able to put those in. So if someone else wants to use the skill, they put their own credentials in, and then it gives them their stuff. I also have a demo Twitter app with the same kind of thing, where it'll tell you your Twitter feed, and of course you want it to tell you your Twitter feed, not someone else's Twitter feed. So we have to make a Grails app to facilitate that. So we need to use something called account linking. And so Grails is a really kind of great, straightforward thing to do this. I do have a plugin for Grails that will spit out an Alexa skill, kind of like the Lazybones template, but it's a plugin for Grails that will spit out Speechlet classes. And it adds a new artifact type under Grails app called Speechlet, and it'll put a class in there for you, whatever you want to call it. You just say, if you've ever used the Quartz plugin where you say, like, create Quartz job, and then you give it a name, and it puts it out under the Quartz jobs directory. It works the same exact way. It'll put it under Grails app Speechlets, and then it'll put your class there and spit it all out as a boilerplate thing, and then you just need to fill in the blanks and get going. It's a little more complicated to get Spring Security UI, OAuth is what the demo is that I have here. But I plan in the future on making like a template, like a profile for Grails that would have all this kind of stuff set up for you, because it's about a page worth of configuration of all the Spring Security stuff. But it does work quite well. If you want to set up your own server, that's what we did here. It needs to have a valid SSL cert that Amazon recognizes, and it needs to be accessible on the internet. So you can't really run an external thing on your own laptop unless Alexa can get to your laptop and communicate to it. And you would have to be running it on port 443, and it has to be SSL and not just a self-signed cert. Self-signed cert works in dev mode for you, but if you want to publish it, it has to be a real cert. You can still get them. I found one called Rapid SSL. I think I got it for like $13 for 2 years. So, and Amazon likes it. So if you look around for like coupons or discounts, you can get them pretty cheap. There's some docs there. It gives them what certs they do trust. All right, so this VictorOps skill, this is something that's putting all of the advanced things together with Grails and making a Grails app. And the way this works is if I go to my Alexa console here, and go to my skills, I link it from here. So I can disable the skill to unlink the account. But let me just pull up the... this is the Grails app here that you can create an account with using all the Spring Security stuff and Spring Security UI stuff that people like Bird have put a lot of work into, and it makes spinning up an app to do this really, really easy. So you can just register yourself an account or log in. See if I can remember my password. There we go. And so here I can say link my API, and I can put my API credentials here. It's basically just CRUD pages to do that. And using the OAuth stuff, Amazon will connect to the Grails app with the OAuth, and you just say log in and then say authorized, and then you're good to go. It's linked. Now it knows my VictorOps credentials go with my my Alexa account, right? Not someone else's. You can see if the internet has come back or not.
Because your computer is connected.
Alexa, open VictorOps.
Welcome to the VictorOps skill.
There we go.
Say list open incidents for open incidents or list teams.
So this is-
Am I on call?
This is pulling from a live VictorOps account, and I have some dummy data set up of who's on call. Who's on call?
The following people are on call. Vanderwerf.
Okay, it just says, oh, I'm on call. That's who's on call right at that moment. Ask VictorOps, get latest incidents.
Welcome to the VictorOps skill. Say list open incidents for open incidents or list teams or when am I on call?
Get open incidents.
You have 2 incidents. Incident ID 22. Houston, we have a problem. Started at Friday, March 3rd, 2017, 6:40 and 2 seconds GMT, and is currently active. Would you like to resolve or go to next incident?
Resolve.
Incident ID 26. Database connection failed. Started at Thursday, March 23rd, 2017, 6:01 and 47 seconds GMT, and is currently active. Would you like to resolve or go to next incident?
Next incident.
You have no more incidents.
So you can kind of do this as an IT application, right? You can say what's going on. So instead of having to check your phone all the time if you're on call at work, you can ask it if there's any open incidents, and you can handle them right there if they're simple stuff. If it's database down, that probably would mean you're in trouble. But these are contrived circumstances here. So this Grails app here, let's take a look at what's in here. So here's under Grails app, the plugin will spit out a artifact type called speechlets, and then it creates this thing called a speechlet of whatever you give it when you create it in the command line. And so this one's called VictorOps speechlet, and this guy has session started. It's not doing much. One thing that we've added here that's really neat, you can do metrics. So we've actually have an Amazon API gateway app set up to where every time someone does something in the application, it increments counters in a DynamoDB table, and that way you can get metrics of who's using your skill and what they're using it for. You can't tell their real name. You just have a unique Amazon identifier that you can store. So you can get, find analytics based on how people are using your skill, or maybe a feature's used more than others. Pretty nifty stuff. So like every time someone does a login, for example, we log that. If they resolve an incident or change an incident status. And so we've got basically intents for all these things here. You see it listed out, and all the methods that you call to invoke them. So this one we've added quite a bit of stuff to. You can get a list of teams. You can find out who's on call for the team, all that kind of stuff. And this is something that VictorOps is looking to demo at their booth or whatever. It's kind of a neat application test of how this stuff works. And what else do we have that's interesting in here? It basically creates an inner class. It's a controller here, also tacked on the end. It's kind of handles everything for you. You really don't have to do much other than fill in the blanks when it spits out all this stuff here. You just need to fill in your code to respond to it, set up your intent schema, set up your sample utterances, and then you can start making Amazon Alexa skills. The easiest way to get started, though, is with the Lambda stuff, just because if you look at the config file for this guy, there's quite a bit of stuff to set up, mostly the Spring security things. But if I can get a profile made, then it would spit out some of this boilerplate stuff for you on what URLs need to be exposed for Alexa to work based on what you called your class and all that stuff. This one actually sends mail, so you can, sends if I forgot my password and all that stuff from the Spring Security UI, all that works nicely. You can do another thing here to help you debug as well that I added. If you say serialized requests, it'll take every JSON response that you get from Alexa and write it to the disk, and you can debug it that way. So one thing, if you're not using account linking, what you can do is take that JSON, download it to your local PC, run your Grails app locally, and then just send that JSON to it in a curl command. And so if you're having a weird bug and you can't quite figure it out, and it's kind of a slow, tedious process to keep re-uploading it, either uploading a WAR file to a server or a Lambda function, you can test it locally that way in your local debugger and then figure out where's my bug coming from. So that's a way to help you when you're kind of getting stuck when your skill doesn't work. Because it's not super helpful when it breaks. It'll just say, I had a problem with your skill, and then it kind of barfs. If you're using the Lambda functions, you can log in to the console here and go to CloudWatch and see the logs. There's so many services now, it's crazy. So every Lambda function you have here will be under logs. And so here's a Groovy Podcast skill. So it spits out every log, all your standard out, all your log4j output gets dumped into this guy here, and you can search through them. That's how you do it if you're doing a Lambda. Obviously, it's just using regular logging in Grails if you're running your own app. All right. If you want to publish your own skills, I've got some tips here. So you need to give it an icon of a certain size. You have to have that valid SSL cert. You have to have a privacy policy posted on their thing. You also have to provide help in your skill, and you have to always be able to stop or cancel it. Basically, when they go and test it, they'll try to trip your stuff up and do that. 3 minutes? Yeah. They also check to make sure it doesn't violate any trademark thing. They're overly cautious. I had a lot of problems with the Groovy Podcast skill. I actually had Ken Cousin have to write a letter and send it to Amazon to get past their thing saying I didn't own the rights to the Groovy Podcast. And then initially they got even more aggressive, saying that I needed permission from Podbean, even though Podbean doesn't actually own any podcasts. It would be like me having to get permission from Amazon Web Services because something's hosted on it, right? But this thing's all very new to them, and they're trying to figure it out too. It takes about 2 to 7 days to get feedback after you publish something. So you definitely want to make sure you've tested it thoroughly as you can, or the cycle's going to keep ticking a while. And I've found no rhyme or reason of whether it's 2 to 7 days of how to tell. Every theory I've come up with has been busted. Sometimes it's the next day, sometimes it's a week. There's some UI tips here. Try to make sample utterances specific as possible. More is better. Custom slots whenever possible to help it understand things or help gate responses so it doesn't go off script with something else. Obviously make sure it always responds when prompted for things. Be specific. Guide user with prompts, like tell them what to do or tell them what their options are, because they're not going to be able to guess. That's just kind of a UI thing with this thing you need to do. Again, use misspellings and phonetics and words when you're returning speech back. If you don't want to go the full SSML route, it will help it say things a little bit better. Just when you do a card return, don't do the misspelled stuff or you look like an idiot. So, a couple gotchas here. Use number type for numbers, otherwise it'll return the text of like 2, TWO, instead of the number 2. So that can be a bit of a pain when you're parsing things. Sometimes you need to use something called a literal type, but it is deprecated. Again, self-signed certs, you can use them in dev mode, but the host name must match the common name in the certificate, or it will reject it and give you a weird error, and you'll spend hours trying to figure out why. All right, here's all the source to all this stuff. I've got all the links here posted. I'll share the slides out after this, so you can go dig in and start making things. We've got the link for the Lazybones template. We've got some workshop labs that we did last summer, and I'll be doing those again this year in Great Confi U. So if you're going to be there, come check it out. This will be an all-day kind of deal. I've got source to all these other things too from my GitHub repos. So, yep, that's it. Thank you.